In the deep, snow-choked wilderness of the Montana Rockies, where the silence is heavy enough to crush a man, an event occurred that science simply could not explain. A Siberian tiger cub, only a few days old, was left alone in the freezing vastness. For this tiny life, death should have been the only option. Yet, what unfolded was a story not found in any biology textbook. Animal welfare organizations across the globe argued it was impossible. Scientists warned it went against the laws of nature. But in a solitary cabin miles from civilization, a startling decision was made that defied them all. This moving saga, unfolding between two different species, forces us to redefine what we call love. Dawn in the American Rockies begins with silence. The towering peaks, draped in white mist, wait for the sun's first greeting. This is a place where the purest wild still breathes. A majestic Siberian tiger, likely an escapee from an illegal transport route, was moving cautiously through the crags. Her newborn cub in tow. Her eyes were filled with alertness. Her only mission in this harsh terrain was to protect her child. But then, the crack of a rifle echoed from the valley. Poachers. The mother instinctively hid her cub in the shadow of a boulder and ran in the opposite direction to draw the threat away. Another gunshot rang out, sharp and final. The mother never returned. The tiny cub, barely 2 days old, waited patiently in the cold and fear. But as the long night gave way to a grey morning, his mother did not appear. That was when Ethan, a ranger working for the state wildlife sanctuary, heard a faint, pathetic cry while patrolling the ridge. He couldn't ignore the sound. He searched the crevice of the rocks and found a shivering, striped ball of fur. The cub was so small his eyes hadn't even opened. A tiger? Ethan was stunned. Here? Even in captivity, Siberian tigers are rare. Finding one in the Montana wild was unheard of. The cub would not survive an hour without a mother. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped the creature into his coat. A tiny life breathed weakly against his chest. Driving back to the sanctuary in his truck, Ethan watched the cub in the portable incubator. He named him Titan, but for 3 days, Titan refused the bottle. He barely drank, as if he had lost the will to live. Even after arriving at the facility, Titan's condition did not improve. The experts shook their heads. The survival rate for a hand-reared cub who lost its mother so early is nearly zero. Ethan took a risk. He brought Titan to his personal cabin near the treeline. There lived Molly, a 9-year-old Border Collie. Molly was grieving. She had lost her own litter of puppies just months prior. She had lost her sharp intelligence and playfulness, retreating into a shell of depression. Ethan had a crazy idea. He decided to show Titan to Molly. How would a herding dog react to an apex predator? Molly stared at the tiny, whimpering thing Ethan held. It was a strange creature with white fur and black stripes. The scent was unlike anything she had ever smelled, wild and musky. But there was something familiar beneath it. The scent of a baby. The weakness and helplessness touched something deep in Molly's broken heart. Ethan, skeptical and tense, gently placed Titan on the rug. He didn't know if Molly would snap or walk away. Molly approached slowly, her nose working, sniffing the cub. At that moment, Titan opened his eyes for the first time and looked up. Molly's tail gave a faint wag. It was the first time in months. She gently extended her tongue and began to lick the small tiger's head. Comforted by the warmth, as if being groomed by his own mother, Titan let out a soft mewl. Ethan watched in silence, unable to believe his eyes. Molly circled Titan, then lay down, curling her body to create a warm pocket for him. Instinctively, Titan crawled toward the warmth of her belly. Molly wrapped her front paws around him. Ethan's sister, Sarah, grabbed her camera to record the scene. "Ethan, this is impossible," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "She's nursing him like her own." It was an extremely rare case in ethology. Days passed, and the miracle deepened. Titan became completely accustomed to Molly's scent. He cried when she wasn't there and found peace only when she was near. Molly, true to her breed, never let him out of her sight. At night, she slept with her paws wrapped tightly around the tiger. But Ethan was anxious. Warnings from his colleagues at the sanctuary played on a loop in his head. "The mortality rate is too high," they said, especially in a home environment. Yet, when Titan was with Molly, he looked different. He drank his milk greedily and slept deeply. Molly's warmth was the medicine no doctor could prescribe. Sarah's video of Molly and Titan was unintentionally posted to social media. She meant to share it with a few friends, but it went viral overnight. The image of a tiny Siberian tiger sleeping in the paws of a Border Collie touched hearts globally. But with the praise came the backlash. Phones at the sanctuary didn't stop ringing. Putting a tiger with a dog is a dangerous experiment. The representative of a major environmental group shouted at Ethan, "Tigers are endangered. Have you considered the risk of disease? The predatory instinct? The pressure from the sanctuary director increased. Ethan, this attention is becoming a liability. The cub needs a professional environment. Don't act on emotion. You cannot ignore the data. Ethan felt cornered. Finally, he made the painful decision. I'm sorry, Molly, he whispered. I have to take him back. When Ethan picked Titan up, Molly immediately sensed the shift in the atmosphere. She tried to block Ethan, whining desperately as her instinct told her that her child was being taken. At the sanctuary, Titan was a problem from day one. He refused milk and cried incessantly, pacing his high-tech incubator nervously. The staff tried everything, but it was useless. Titan was looking for Molly. Molly's condition was no better. Back at the cabin, she refused food and water. She didn't react when Ethan called her name. She just paced the spot where Titan used to sleep, sniffing the floor. At night, her mournful howls echoed through the valley. On the second day, Ethan received an emergency call. Titan is in critical condition. Severe dehydration, hypothermia. Ethan looked at Molly. She was fading just as fast as the tiger. Was this really the right thing to do? Ethan was torn between his professional judgment and the desire to save a life. That night, the sanctuary was silent, but inside the sterile room, a small battle was being fought. Titan, despite his weakness, was thrashing against the incubator walls. To him, this temperature-controlled box was a cold prison. Around 11 p.m., the impossible happened. Titan managed to force a latch loose and squeezed out of the incubator. How a creature less than a week old found the strength, no one knew. Security cameras later showed Titan crawling across the linoleum floor, heading instinctively toward the exit. Ethan got the call at 2 a.m. He's gone. The cub escaped. Ethan sped his truck down the icy roads. Deep down, he knew where Titan was going. When he arrived at his cabin, he saw a sight that stopped his heart. Titan was outside the door, crying pitifully. His small body was shivering violently, but his voice was loud, screaming for his mother. Before Ethan could move, the door burst open. Molly rushed out. She didn't bark. She ran to him and began frantically licking his entire body, cleaning away the sterile smell of the hospital, washing away the dirt of his journey. Titan surrendered completely to her warm tongue. He stopped crying immediately. Molly lay down in the snow, wrapping her body around him to transfer her heat. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. Could science explain this? It wasn't a biological bond. And if it was a coincidence, it was too heartbreakingly perfect. Sarah arrived, camera in hand. She couldn't miss this. Ethan, this isn't just animal instinct, she said, her voice shaking. This is love. Science says this shouldn't happen. Sarah continued, filming the Border Collie and the tiger. But the data can't explain why they are both dying apart and thriving together. Ethan nodded. The principles he had defended as an expert were crumbling. He made his decision. There is only one way to save this life. He stroked Molly's head. Molly is his real mother. External pressure and expert concerns no longer mattered. Sarah put down her camera and took Ethan's hand. Let's make a documentary. The world needs to know that love has no boundaries. A month passed, and Titan grew visibly. The tiny body that once fit in Molly's paws was now the size of her torso. His stripes became distinct, and a wild aura began to radiate from him. But the biggest change was his behavior. He didn't stalk like a cat, he trotted. He mimicked Molly. When she ran to herd the chickens, Titan ran alongside her, trying to copy her movements. Molly watched Titan grow, and with the wisdom of her breed, she began to create distance. It was as if she knew the time for his independence was approaching. But a new shadow fell over the cabin. Molly began to cough. At first, Ethan thought it was the cold, but it grew persistent. He examined her and realized it was pneumonia. Compounded by her age, her immunity was failing. Ethan treated her aggressively, but the pressure from the outside world returned. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issued a notice, official investigation pending. Potential violation of the Endangered Species Act. The sanctuary director was firm. Ethan, time is up. Titan must go into the rewilding program. He needs professional predation training. If he stays with a dog, he will lose his wild instincts and we can never release him. Ethan looked at the pair. Molly still cared for Titan, but she was different. When he played too rough, she moved away. She slept a few feet apart. She was preparing him. Sarah captured these moments. She's saying goodbye, Sarah said softly. This is a mother's final act of love. Letting go. Ethan made the heart-wrenching call. We're taking him to the rewilding enclosure. Molly is sick, and Titan needs to learn to be a tiger. That night, Molly broke her new rule. She held Titan tight, longer and warmer than usual. Titan slept deeply. unaware it was their last night. But Molly knew. The rewilding center was a massive, fenced section of the forest designed to mimic the Siberian tiger. Titan stayed there for a month. At first, he paced the fence, crying for Molly, but gradually, the ancient instincts awoke. Trainers were amazed. His adaptation is incredibly fast. The lead biologist noted, "He's not just hunting, he's using strategy. He's calculating." Perhaps the intelligence of the Border Collie had rubbed off on him. But on the 35th day, disaster struck. Titan tried to leap from a high ridge to catch a bird and slipped on the ice. He fell 20 feet onto jagged rocks. He was rushed to surgery. The prognosis was grim: multiple fractures in the hind legs, internal bleeding. The chief veterinarian looked grave. For a wild animal, this level of damage is usually a death sentence. The phone rang. It was the International Wildlife Board. "Euthanasia is the most humane option. He will never hunt again. Don't let him suffer." "No." Ethan slammed his fist on the desk. "He's a fighter. I'm paying for the surgery." "Be realistic, Ethan," his colleagues urged. "The cost is astronomical, and the recovery is unlikely." "I don't care," Ethan said. He dialed his neighbor who was watching the cabin. "Bring Molly. Bring her to the clinic. Now." When Molly arrived, Titan was unconscious on the metal table. Molly stopped at the door of the operating room and refused to move. The staff tried to guide her away, but she planted her feet. She would not leave him. Night fell. Molly sat by the recovery cage, staring through the bars. Occasionally, she pressed her nose against his, breathing warm air onto his face. "Mum is here. You're okay." At 4 a.m., the miracle happened again. Titan opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the black and white face of the Border Collie. He let out a weak chuff. Molly licked his paw through the bars. "Unbelievable," the vet whispered, checking the monitors. His vitals just stabilized. The stress hormones dropped instantly. Love had bridged the gap where medicine failed. Titan's recovery defied all logic. A month later, he was walking. At first, he limped, but with Molly pacing slowly beside him, forcing him to match her rhythm, he regained his confidence. She was his rehabilitation partner. But as Titan grew stronger, Molly grew weaker. The pneumonia had scarred her lungs, and her old heart was tired. Yet, she pretended to be strong whenever Titan was watching. Eventually, the day came. Titan was fully healed, massive and powerful. He was too big for the cabin, too wild for the world of men. Ethan and Sarah drove him to the designated release zone, a vast, protected wilderness area deep in the mountains, far from human contact. Ethan took Molly to a hill overlooking the valley. She watched the transport crate open. She didn't run after him. She sat, majestic and still, her fur blowing in the wind, watching her boy disappear into the trees. She accepted the separation with a quiet grace. Seasons changed. Molly passed away peacefully in her sleep the following winter. Ethan buried her on that hill, overlooking the wild lands. Years went by. One autumn afternoon, Ethan was at the sanctuary when he got a radio call from a field researcher. "Ethan, you need to come to Sector 4. We have a visual on a male Siberian tiger. But, it's weird, he's not alone." Ethan drove to the location. His heart pounding, he hiked up the ridge to the spot where Molly was buried. He couldn't believe his eyes. There, standing near the simple stone marker of Molly's grave, was Titan. He was a magnificent, scarring beast now, the king of the mountains. But he wasn't alone. 2 young cubs were tumbling around his feet. Titan wasn't just visiting, he had brought his offspring. He looked toward Ethan, then turned his massive head toward the grave. He let out a low, rumbling sound, not a roar of aggression, but a greeting. It was the specific sound he used to make when Molly cleaned him. "Mum, I'm doing okay. Look, I brought my kids." The 2 cubs stopped playing and lay down near the grave, resting their heads on their paws in a way that looked uncannily like a Border Collie waiting for a command. A gust of wind blew through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Ethan felt tears streaming down his face. Titan, raised by a dog, had become a father, and he had returned to pay his respects. The legacy of the Border Collie lived on in the stripes of the tiger. Ethan looked up at the vast Montana sky. "Thank you, Molly," he whispered. "You taught us what love really means." He realized then that between nature, animals, and humans, there are bonds that data can never quantify. Love is the strongest force, capable of crossing any barrier, continuing the cycle of life. The sun set, bathing Molly's grave and the tigers in a golden light. The story had ended, but the echo of their bond would ring through these mountains forever. 73.8s